Warning: the following content may be considered disturbing or unsettling to certain viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is meant for informative purposes only. Hundreds of thousands of people are reported missing every year. This is just one of them. A seemingly innocent trip to the grocery store one day in California turned out to be a 3 decades-long mystery. Michaela Joy Garecht was born January 24th, 1979, and was 9 years old when she disappeared from Hayward, California. On November 19th, 1988, Michaela and a friend named Katrina decided to go to the Rainbow Market to buy snacks. They went to the market and took their scooters. When they went to the market, they got there and put their scooters up and went in, got their snacks, and left. When they left on foot. And sometime before they got home, they realized that they had forgotten their scooters at the market. So they went back to the market to get them. When they got back to the market, they realized that their scooters had actually been moved farther down to the parking lot from when they originally left them. And they were next to a parked car. Michaela, not thinking anything of it, of course, decided to go get the scooter. And one of the scooters that was laying down, she grabbed it by the handles, and when she did, a man jumped out of a parked car, scooped her by her waist, and threw her inside the car. As she was screaming, her friend Katrina ran into the supermarket and told a clerk that was working what happened. Katrina was quoted saying, "I looked up when I heard her screaming, and I saw a man putting her into his car. She was still screaming. I just stood there and watched and frozen in shock." Katrina was the only witness to Michaela's abduction. Michaela was screaming still, and Katrina went inside after the car left with Michaela and told a clerk what happened, and she called the police. According to the transcript of the 911 call, the description of the man who took Michaela was hippie-like. However, the description that the clerk gave to the 911 operator was not accurate. It was actually someone that she had seen in the parking lot a little bit before Michaela was kidnapped. So I'm not really sure what happened there. If Katrina is giving a description of one person and then the clerk is saying something else to the 911 operator, I'm not sure there. I'm not trying to put the blame on anybody, but I don't understand the disconnect, and I couldn't really find anything about that, what happened there really, other than the fact that communication was skewed, I guess you could say. Because of the inaccurate description, the media reported the wrong information for 2 whole days. And like I've said in previous videos, we all know that the most important time, especially when somebody is kidnapped, is the first 48 hours. They say that that is the time when you will most likely find them alive. So for 2 whole days, the media had false reports, and apparently, according to what I read, the police department knew that the information was wrong, and they still allowed the media to report on it. Dennis Oliver was a journalist at the time and said for 2 days, the Hayward Police Department allowed media to publish false descriptions of the suspect. The first opportunity to rescue this girl was immediately after it happened, and for 2 days, they were looking for the wrong person. The dispatcher took information from the wrong person, and from there on out, communication was just not handled correctly in the critical 24 to 48 hours. Michaela's kidnapping was actually one of the most extensive searches in the police department's history. So extensive that they actually received over 5,000 tips alone just in the first year of Michaela being gone. Even Joe Montana, the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers at the time, got involved and made a plea to the public for Michaela's safe return. A $70,000 reward was also offered to anyone who could give the information to the police on Michaela's disappearance or her whereabouts. Because of all the searching for Michaela, 4,000 tips alone by December, so just a few weeks of Michaela being gone, they received 4,000 tips, and they were given to the police. However, an officer from the Hayward Police Department said that the only way we are closer to finding out what happened to her is that we have eliminated so many leads in this case. but as far as knowing who did it or why or what happened to her, we're no closer. Michaela was also featured as a face on the milk carton billboards, and she was everywhere nationally, and thousands of flyers and posters went up and were spread throughout the community where she lived. It took all of a day for family, friends, and volunteers to send out 42,000 flyers with Michaela's face on it. 4 years later, in December of 1992, a false report was given when a person named Roger Hayward claimed to have buried Michaela in a Union City field. Roger was an inmate at a prison in Indiana at the time of this statement. He was given time to be able to come out. He was flown out by the police department in California to tell them what happened to Michaela and where she was buried. They searched for 8 hours. 8 hours went by, and he finally said that he lied and that he had nothing to do with it, and that he was basically just screwing around with them. Because of his false information and everything that he did and interfering with the case, he was given an additional 6.5 years in his sentence. It does not pay, apparently, as we have noticed with all these cases, to lie. In 1994, the police had followed up on more than 50,000 leads at this time. 15,000. And even more now. 3 decades have gone by. And the search for Michaela still continues. Someone was quoted by saying, "We'll go anywhere, any corner of the earth, to try to bring Michaela home." The chief inspector named Robert Lampkin said that. Amber Schwartz was another girl that was kidnapped in June of 1988, and the police thought maybe the cases were connected somehow, and they thought that because she lived close to Hayward, where Michaela was kidnapped from, and a man named Tim Bindner had kind of inserted himself in Amber's case, and I think Michaela's case as well, in the search for her, so they thought maybe he had something to do with it, because that is a thing where people are actually the person that did it, and they will interfere with the case to kind of make themselves the hero in it somehow, which is so sick and so demented. And because of how much he had interjected himself in these cases, he actually was considered a suspect for a long time. And a 13-year-old girl named Eileen Michaloff also went missing from the Dublin, California area. And she was kidnapped in 1989. And he was also a suspect in the case of a girl named Amanda Campbell who went missing in Fairfield in 1991. So I guess he was involved in all of these cases somehow with trying to find these girls, and they thought that he had something to do with it, because it wasn't just one, it was 3, 4 that Tim had put himself into. And of course, Tim has denied any involvement in any of the disappearances of these girls. In 1997, a forensic psychologist named John Philpin actually wrote a book called Stalemate, a shocking true story of child abduction and murder. And in the book, he really went into detail about Tim's involvement in the searches for these girls, and how he thought, I haven't read the book, but I'm assuming that he really thought that Tim was maybe the guy that did it, because of how much he had inserted himself in the investigations of looking for these girls. And in 2009, when J.C. Lee Dugard was found after being held captive for 18 years by that, you can't even call him a man, a POS, named Philip Garrido. I think we all know about that one by now. Everything that she went through was horrendous. He's just scum. And they thought that maybe he had something to do with it, because he had actually gotten out of prison about 3 months or so before Michaela was kidnapped. So Michaela was kidnapped, and then 3 months later, they thought maybe he had something to do with it, because of, if you look at Michaela and you look at JC, I think they kind of look the same. They're both very young. They both have blonde hair, and they were both abducted in broad daylight. JC was going to school, and I think she was at the school bus stop, and they tasered her. I think that's what happened. They tasered her when they asked her a question. and they were able to taser her, and then they kidnapped her in broad daylight. And same thing with Michaela. Somebody got out of the parked car as she was grabbing a scooter and scooped her up and threw her in their car and just sped away. The car was also very similar in description to the one that Michaela was missing, that was kidnapped in, and so they thought maybe Philip Garrido had something to do with it. Him and his wife had something to do with it. The Hayward Police Department did a lot of looking into that theory for any connections to the cases, but there weren't any. There was nothing to connect Philip Garrido to the kidnapping of Michaela Joy Garecht. However, because of JC being found alive and safe, and honestly, God bless her, everything that she and her kids have gone through, I can't even wrap my head around something like that. But because of everything that happened with JC, Michaela's case was brought back into media attention again. It brought light to it again, and her face was out there again, and more leads came flooding in about Michaela. In August of 2012, a man named Wesley Shermantine, who was one of the speed freak killers, I actually don't know anything about them. I'm gonna have to look into that, I think. But anyway, he wrote a letter to the Stockton Record claiming that his partner, literally his partner in crime, Lauren Herzog, committed suicide in January of that year, but he thought that he looked like the description that was given to the police about the guy that kidnapped Michaela. In the letter, Wesley wrote that Lauren Herzog looked a lot like the man that took Michaela, and as he put it, that Hayward girl. Like, he couldn't, I don't know if maybe he didn't know her name, but it just sounds so disrespectful, especially when you read about the things that these men did. It's just unbelievable. It's actually kind of believable, I guess, when you think about the type of people that we do talk about in true crime videos. I guess you can't expect much. The duo was caught in 1999, and they are thought to have actually killed up to 19 people in Northern California. So because of that, one of the things that Katrina Rodriguez said was, I thought then, and I think now, he could be the kidnapper. And I think that there are a lot of features that look very much like the man. It seems like a strong lead. And due to Wesley reaching out, law enforcement began excavating an abandoned well in the rural area of Linden, California in February of 2012. Because that area is where Lauren and Wesley actually got rid of their victims and threw their bodies, I guess, in a well or the surrounding area. The search uncovered thousands of bone pieces, bone fragments, and they thought maybe one of the bone pieces, the fragments, the bodies, I don't really know how to say that, it just sounds so morbid. Anyway, they thought some of the bone fragments found maybe belonged to Michaela. After DNA testing, they were actually able to rule it out. And the bones that they found actually belonged to a woman named Kimberly Billy, who disappeared in 1984. And then they looked again in 2013, but they didn't find anything. Nothing came of the search again. A motion was actually filed in 2015 by an attorney named Mark Garagos because he was informed by a sheriff's deputy in San Joaquin that a pair of Mary Jane shoes were found in the well, and Michaela was seen wearing Mary Jane shoes when she was kidnapped. And they thought that they looked similar to what Michaela was wearing. They thought maybe they were actually the same ones that Michaela was wearing. And he said that the police department actually refused to show them not only the shoes, but any pictures of it. So not just like physical evidence that they actually had the shoes, but pictures. They wouldn't hand any of it over. So the attorney, Mark, got involved in it. And they just wouldn't let him have it. And then, so he had to file the motion. And as of March 2015, the shoes had still not been examined by a forensics person in the Hayward Police Department, and nobody has seen pictures or actually seen these shoes. Michaela's story was featured everywhere. Not only, like I said earlier, was she a face on the milk carton, and she had billboards everywhere. She was actually featured on shows like American Justice, and it was their episode called Vanished. You can find American Justice on YouTube, actually. And her story was actually talked about on Dateline, and was on the Larry King live show in 2009. Unsolved Mysteries actually also covered Michaela's story, and hers was the first ever missing child case to be covered on America's Most Wanted in 1988. And then they actually talked about it again in 2009 because of everything that happened with J.C. Lee Dugard. You know, once again, her face was put out there again. And Katrina Rodriguez, her friend that was with her when she went missing, actually went on the Maury Povich TV show in 1999. So Maury wasn't always just about DNA tests and wild and crazy teenagers. They actually had more serious subjects on. Every year, the anniversary of Michaela's kidnapping has been marked at the site where she was kidnapped. Tons of ribbons are put up. Some are old, some are new, and they put those up by a tree, on a tree where Michaela was kidnapped, where the parked car was at. And her mom, Sharon, actually also has a blog dedicated to Michaela. In May 2019, the FBI put up a $10,000 reward for information on Michaela regarding her case, her disappearance, her whereabouts. In 2020, December of last year, actually, the FBI and Hayward Police Department announced that they arrested a man named David Mish. He's been in prison actually since 1989 for murder and is on trial for the murder of 2 women in 1986 by the Fremont Police Department. In the article I read, it said that if he's convicted, he actually faces the death penalty. But I think California just overturned the death penalty, because I think that's like the thing going on with Scott Peterson is now he gets life in prison instead of the death penalty for killing his wife and unborn child. Side note. And anyway, so I'm not sure if maybe he would get life in prison because of that. If there is an update on that, then I will certainly do an updated video on that. But I couldn't find a lot of information on that, other than the fact that he's been in prison since the 80s because they think that he had something to do with these murders of these 2 women. And then also they think that he is the man that took Michaela. He looks or looked a lot like the man at the time. And one of the descriptions of the man that Katrina gave was that he had fox-like eyes. So just like, I guess, piercing blue eyes or almost white. Yeah. He has been in prison since then. So once again, like I said, if anything comes about it, then I will do an updated video. But they haven't said anything about finding Michaela's body. The suspect, if he is not the man, then the suspect was seen driving a large, older model American-made sedan, and it could have been a 4-door vehicle, and maybe cream or tannish in color. And the car also could have possibly had cement splatters all over it and was pretty beat up. It looked like it had been in, not just an older car, but it had been in an accident maybe at one point. It was in pretty rough shape. And the car was also last seen driving south, speeding, going very, very fast on Mission Boulevard toward nearby Union City, California, and Michaela was inside. If you have any information regarding Michaela's disappearance, please call the Hayward Police Department at 510-293-7000. And I, of course, will put that in the description box below. And if you do come across this video, if you have any theories and you leave them in the comments, I do ask, once again, as always, that you remain respectful. And please keep Michaela and her family in your thoughts. And if you're a praying person, in your prayers. And hopefully, if this man, David, is actually the man that kidnapped her, hopefully he will come clean and tell them where he put Michaela's body and her family can lay her to rest. And please remember, at the end of the day, we are all somebody's someone. Thank you for watching.